"Ma'am, the service elevator is in the back." The words landed across the hotel lobby like a glass shattering in slow motion. Every conversation near the front desk seemed to pause at once. A piano version of Fly Me to the Moon still floated softly through the speakers, but now it sounded distant, drowned beneath the weight of humiliation hanging in the air. Naomi Carter stood motionless beneath the golden chandelier of the Grand Meridian Hotel, her hand resting lightly on the handle of a small black carry-on suitcase. She wore dark jeans, white sneakers, and a fitted black turtleneck beneath a charcoal wool coat. No diamonds, no designer logos, no entourage. To the people staring at her now, she looked ordinary. And that was exactly why Daniel Whitmore thought he could talk to her that way. The hotel manager stepped slightly in front of the polished brass elevator doors, blocking her path with a smile so rehearsed it barely looked human anymore. "Guest elevators are reserved for residents and executive members," he added, louder this time, making sure nearby guests could hear him clearly. Then he pointed toward a narrow hallway near the back of the lobby where fluorescent lights flickered above a gray metal door marked service access only. Staff and deliveries use that elevator. Naomi slowly turned her head toward the hallway. Laundry carts rolled past in the distance. A housekeeper disappeared through the heavy door, carrying folded white towels. The contrast was impossible to miss. In front of her stood marble floors, gold trim, crystal lighting, and velvet chairs that smelled faintly of cedar and expensive cologne. Behind her waited concrete walls and freight corridors meant for people who were never supposed to be seen. A little girl standing beside her mother near the concierge desk looked up innocently and asked the question nobody else in the lobby had the courage to say out loud. "Mom, why can't she use this elevator?" Silence swept across the room so quickly it almost felt physical. Daniel cleared his throat. "Because she's headed the wrong way," he replied coldly. Naomi finally looked directly at him. Her face revealed nothing. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Just stillness. The kind of stillness that made people uncomfortable because it suggested control instead of defeat. Daniel mistook that silence for weakness immediately. "Ma'am, I'm trying to avoid making this difficult," he continued. "We have standards here." Nearby, a businessman lowered his phone from his ear. A young couple sitting near the fountain exchanged uneasy glances. At the bell stand, Marcus Hale, one of the hotel's senior bellmen, straightened slowly as recognition flickered across his face. He knew that name. Carter. He had seen it earlier that morning attached to the penthouse executive profile with owner-level clearance. But before he could speak, Emily Ross stepped beside Daniel holding a digital tablet against her chest. Her sharp heels clicked against the marble floor like warning shots. She scanned Naomi once from head to toe, lingering just long enough on the sneakers to make the insult obvious. "Housekeeping entrance is around the corner too," Emily said casually. "If that's where you're supposed to report." A few guests looked away immediately, not because they agreed, because they knew exactly what they were witnessing and didn't want to feel responsible for it. Naomi inhaled slowly through her nose. She had heard versions of this her entire life. At 16, a country club hostess once asked her to enter through the kitchen because members preferred a cleaner lobby experience. At 24, a real estate broker handed her a janitor application instead of a lease agreement. Different buildings, different faces, same quiet attempt to push her somewhere smaller. Daniel folded his hands confidently in front of him. "Now," he said, gesturing again toward the service hallway. "Are you going to cooperate, or are we going to have a problem?" Naomi Carter did not answer immediately. She simply studied Daniel Whitmore the way an architect studies a crack spreading through a foundation. Calm, precise, patient enough to let the damage reveal itself completely. The mirrored elevator doors reflected the entire scene back at the lobby now. Guests pretending not to stare. Emily standing with her tablet clutched tightly against her chest. The little girl still holding her mother's hand, confused by what she had just witnessed. And Daniel, planted in front of the gold elevator like a man guarding something he believed people like Naomi should never touch. Naomi finally shifted her gaze toward the polished brass buttons beside the elevator. Penthouse, executive lounge, rooftop suites. Every floor in that building had once existed only as sketches spread across a conference table in her Chicago office nearly 8 years earlier. She remembered the late nights, The investor meetings where men twice her age questioned whether luxury hospitality needed her perspective. She remembered flying across the country with blueprints in her lap, while executives smiled politely and suggested safer neighborhoods for her projects. Yet now the very building shaped by her decisions stood around her glowing beneath crystal light, while a white hotel manager tried to redirect her through the back corridor like temporary staff. Daniel misread her silence again. "You know what the issue is here," he said with a thin smile. "People walk into luxury spaces assuming money buys access. But presentation matters too." Emily nodded immediately. "Guests expect a certain environment," she added carefully, as though rehearsing language approved by corporate lawyers. "We cannot just let anyone wander into executive areas." The word anyone hung in the air like smoke. Marcus Hale looked visibly uncomfortable now. He adjusted the cuff of his uniform and glanced toward the concierge station, where Olivia Chun stood frozen behind her monitor. Olivia had worked at the Grand Meridian less than 9 months, but even she recognized the dangerous shift happening in the lobby. This was no longer a misunderstanding. This was judgment becoming policy in real time. Naomi rested one hand lightly against the handle of her suitcase. "Interesting," she said quietly. Her voice was smooth enough to make Daniel lean closer just to hear it. "And what exactly about me suggests I do not belong upstairs?" Daniel hesitated for half a second. That was all. Then arrogance returned to his face. "Ma'am, let us not play games. You arrived through the valet entrance carrying your own luggage. No assistant. No reservation packet. No visible credentials." Emily stepped in quickly. Most executive guests check in privately before arrival. Naomi nodded slowly, as if considering the explanation seriously. "So wealth only looks legitimate when someone else carries it for you." Emily's expression tightened immediately. A businessman near the coffee lounge coughed awkwardly into his sleeve to hide a laugh. Daniel noticed the reaction and his tone sharpened. "This is becoming disruptive." Naomi looked around the lobby. Marble columns rose nearly 30 feet toward vaulted ceilings lined with warm amber lighting. A pianist played softly near the lounge bar. Expensive perfume floated through the air, mixed with the scent of polished wood and fresh lilies arranged near the front desk. The hotel looked exactly the way she designed it to look. Comfortable, elegant, welcoming. Yet standing there now, she could feel every invisible line certain people still believe should separate who deserved luxury from who merely served it. Then Marcus finally stepped forward carefully. "Sir," he said to Daniel, keeping his voice respectful, "I think there may be some confusion with the reservation profile." Daniel turned sharply. "Nobody asked you." Marcus stopped speaking immediately, but the damage was already done. Naomi noticed the flicker of panic behind Emily's eyes. Somewhere deep beneath the lobby floor, the service elevator rumbled upward through the building, carrying kitchen staff toward banquet storage. The sound echoed faintly through the walls like a reminder of exactly where Daniel believed she belonged. Daniel Whitmore straightened his suit jacket as though the conversation had already been decided. That tiny movement alone told Naomi everything she needed to know about him. Men like Daniel believed authority lived in appearances, in polished shoes, in expensive cufflinks, in the ability to decide who entered through the front door and who disappeared through the back. The golden elevator behind him chimed softly as a wealthy older couple stepped out carrying shopping bags from luxury boutiques 3 blocks away. Daniel greeted them instantly with warmth that had been completely absent seconds earlier. "Welcome back, Mr. and Mrs. Langford," he said smoothly. "I trust dinner at Bellamy's was excellent." The couple smiled politely as they passed. Then Mrs. Langford glanced toward Naomi and slowed slightly. Her expression shifted the moment she realized what was happening. Daniel noticed it too, and irritation flashed across his face before disappearing beneath another practiced smile. The elevator doors slid closed again with a soft metallic whisper. Naomi watched the reflection vanish across the mirrored surface. Gold, bright, elegant, the kind of elevator designed to make guests feel elevated before they even reached their rooms. Meanwhile, the service corridor behind her remained open for a moment longer as 2 kitchen employees pushed a heavy cart stacked with banquet trays through the gray industrial hallway. Harsh fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The walls back there were unfinished concrete painted a dull beige that looked exhausted under the buzzing lights. The contrast between the 2 elevators felt almost cruel now. One designed to be seen, one designed to keep people invisible. Emily crossed her arms tightly. If you are staying here, perhaps we should verify your employment assignment first. Naomi turned slowly toward her. Employment assignment. Emily gave a tight smile. Catering staff sometimes arrive through the main entrance by mistake during conferences. Naomi almost smiled at the precision of the insult. Every sentence they used was carefully polished enough to sound professional while delivering the exact same message underneath. You do not belong here. Marcus shifted uneasily near the bell stand again. Her name was definitely flagged executive level earlier, he said carefully, trying once more. Daniel snapped his attention toward him immediately. Marcus, go help the arriving guests outside. The tone was colder this time. Not a request. A warning. Marcus looked toward Naomi apologetically before stepping back. Olivia Chen lowered her eyes to the computer screen at the concierge desk, but Naomi could see her fingers moving rapidly across the keyboard. Searching. Verifying. Trying to understand why owner-level clearance was attached to the woman now being pushed toward the freight elevator. Naomi glanced upward toward the glass ceiling stretching above the lobby. Rain tapped softly against the skylight nearly 40 feet overhead. Chicago weather. Gray and elegant at the same time. She remembered standing inside this exact space 18 months earlier during final construction while hard hats echoed across unfinished marble floors. The architect asked her if she wanted the service corridors expanded. Naomi had said yes immediately. The staff should never feel hidden, she told them back then. Everyone in this building deserves dignity. And now here she stood while her own hotel manager weaponized those same corridors to humiliate her publicly. Daniel stepped closer and lowered his voice just enough to sound threatening without attracting security attention. You are creating discomfort for our guests. Naomi looked around slowly. Several guests were openly watching now. A young man near the espresso bar had discreetly lifted his phone. The little girl from earlier still stared at Naomi with confused eyes, while her mother looked increasingly embarrassed. Interesting, Naomi said softly. Because from where I am standing, they seem uncomfortable with you. Emily scoffed under her breath. This is exactly the problem nowadays. Everybody wants special treatment. Naomi finally looked directly at the gold elevator again. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished doors. Calm. Still. Controlled. Then the elevator opened once more, and a sharply dressed executive stepped out, carrying a leather portfolio. The moment he saw Naomi, his eyes widened slightly in recognition. The executive froze the second he recognized Naomi Carter. His polished leather portfolio slipped slightly beneath his arm as surprise flashed across his face. Miss Carter, he said instinctively, taking half a step forward before stopping himself. The entire lobby shifted at once. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough for the air itself to feel different. Daniel noticed it immediately. Do you know her? He asked sharply. The executive hesitated. That hesitation said everything. He absolutely knew her. But corporate instincts kicked in fast. Men in expensive suits learned early that survival often meant reading the room before speaking. And right now the room had become dangerous. I believe we have met briefly, the man replied carefully. Naomi gave him the smallest nod. Nothing more. No rescue. No explanation. Daniel relaxed slightly, mistaking caution for uncertainty again. Then perhaps you can explain our guest policies to your acquaintance, he said. She seems confused about where staff access is located. The executive's jaw tightened almost invisibly. Naomi saw it. So did Olivia behind the concierge desk. The silence stretched too long. Daniel stepped aside from the golden elevator and pointed once more toward the back hallway. This way, he said firmly. I am not asking again. Naomi looked at him for several seconds without moving. Then, to the shock of nearly everyone watching, she calmly picked up the handle of her suitcase and began walking toward the service corridor. A murmur spread quietly through the lobby. Some guests looked relieved the confrontation was ending. Others looked disturbed by how easily it had happened. Marcus lowered his eyes as Naomi passed the bell stand. He looked ashamed, even though none of this was his fault. Emily followed closely behind Daniel with the stiff confidence of someone who believed they had just protected the image of the hotel. The farther Naomi walked from the main lobby, the colder the building felt. The marble floors disappeared first, replaced by gray industrial tile marked with black scuff lines from years of rolling carts. Then the music vanished. No more piano. No soft lighting. No scent of cedar or fresh lilies. Only the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the distant clatter of dishes somewhere deep inside the banquet kitchens. The service corridor narrowed around them like the inside of a machine. Metal shelving lined one wall stacked with extra linens and boxed supplies. A maintenance worker pushing a mop bucket stopped when he saw Naomi being escorted through the hallway in silence. His expression shifted. Immediately, he recognized humiliation when he saw it. Daniel pressed the service elevator button with visible impatience. "You people always think rules are personal," he muttered under his breath. Naomi heard every word. So did Emily. Neither corrected him. The freight elevator doors rattled loudly before sliding open with mechanical reluctance. Inside, the walls were scratched steel covered with dents from years of equipment transport. One overhead light flickered faintly. It smelled like detergent, cleaning chemicals, and overheated machinery. Daniel gestured inside. "This elevator reaches every floor too," he said coldly. "You should be grateful we are accommodating you at all." Naomi stepped into the elevator slowly. The steel walls reflected distorted fragments of everyone standing there. Daniel looked taller in the reflection. Emily looked nervous. Naomi looked impossibly calm. Then the executive from the lobby suddenly appeared at the end of the hallway. He had followed them. Slightly out of breath, he stopped several feet away as though crossing an invisible line could cost him something. "Daniel," he called carefully, "maybe we should pause for a second." Daniel turned, irritated now. "This does not concern you." The executive glanced at Naomi again. This time there was unmistakable fear in his eyes. Not fear of her. Fear for everyone else in this hallway who still had no idea who they were talking to. Naomi finally spoke, her voice quiet enough that everyone had to lean in to hear it clearly. "No," she said softly while the freight elevator doors remained open behind her. "Please, let him continue." The freight elevator hummed behind Naomi Carter like an old machine struggling to keep secrets buried underground. Its steel doors remained open, exposing scratched walls and dim fluorescent light that painted everyone inside the corridor in pale gray tones. Daniel Whitmore folded his arms confidently, still believing control belonged entirely to him. The executive standing at the end of the hallway looked far less certain now. Tiny beads of sweat had formed near his temples despite the cold air flowing through the service corridor vents. He recognized disaster unfolding in real time, and unlike Daniel, he understood exactly how expensive this disaster could become. "Daniel," he repeated more carefully, "maybe we should verify her credentials before this goes any further." Daniel gave a dry laugh. "You cannot be serious." He gestured toward Naomi without even looking directly at her now, as if reducing eye contact somehow reduced her importance too. "Look around. Does this honestly look like an executive guest to you?" Naomi remained perfectly still inside the freight elevator. One hand rested lightly against her suitcase, while the flickering overhead light reflected softly across her calm expression. The stillness unsettled people more than anger ever could. Emily shifted uneasily beside Daniel. Confidence had started leaking from her posture now that another executive appeared visibly nervous. "Perhaps we should just contact corporate guest services," she suggested quietly. Daniel shook his head immediately. "Absolutely not. The last thing this hotel needs is every random confrontation becoming a corporate review." Naomi noticed the phrase immediately. Random confrontation. That was how people like Daniel survived moments like this. By pretending humiliation was administrative. By turning prejudice into procedure. Somewhere deeper in the hallway, a dishwasher crashed loudly onto a metal prep table, making everyone flinch for a second. The service floor continued operating around them, completely unaware that the future of several careers was collapsing only 50 feet away. Marcus finally appeared near the hallway entrance again, pretending to organize luggage carts while secretly watching everything unfold. Olivia stood just beyond him, holding a tablet tightly against her chest now. Her face had gone pale. She had found the profile. She knew exactly who Naomi Carter was. But fear held her in place. Fear of management. Fear of being wrong. Fear of speaking too late. Naomi saw all of it instantly. She had spent her entire career reading rooms full of people afraid to interrupt powerful men. Daniel pressed the elevator button impatiently again, even though the doors were already open. "Either get on the elevator or leave the property," he said sharply. "Those are your options." Naomi tilted her head slightly. Interesting choice of words. Daniel frowned. Excuse me. Options, Naomi repeated softly. People usually offer options when they believe they have authority. Emily looked toward the executive nervously. Sir, perhaps you should say something. The executive loosened his tie slightly, clearly trapped between instinct and self-preservation. Daniel, he said carefully, there are certain individuals connected to this property that you may not personally recognize. Daniel laughed again, louder this time. Then they should probably present themselves appropriately. The hallway went silent. Even the maintenance worker mopping near the supply closet stopped moving. Naomi slowly stepped out of the freight elevator. Her sneakers echoed softly against the industrial tile floor as she walked forward with unshaken calm. Daniel instinctively moved aside without realizing he had done it. Tiny reactions always revealed the truth before words did. Naomi looked directly at Olivia near the hallway entrance. How long have you worked here? Olivia swallowed hard. 9 months, ma'am. And in those 9 months, Naomi asked gently, how many employees have you seen treated this way in front of guests? Olivia hesitated. Her silence answered the question better than words could. Daniel's jaw tightened immediately. This conversation is over. Naomi finally looked back at him fully. Her voice stayed quiet, controlled, almost compassionate. No, Daniel, she said softly. Now it is finally becoming honest. For a moment, nobody moved. The service corridor felt suspended outside normal time, caught somewhere between embarrassment and revelation. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead with a dull electric hum, while cold air drifted through the narrow hallway carrying the scent of industrial detergent and polished steel. Naomi Carter stood at the center of it all with the same calm expression she had worn since the lobby. But inside her mind, another hallway had already reopened. Another building. Another version of herself. She was 17 again, standing outside the Hawthorne Country Club in Charlotte, North Carolina. Sunday afternoon. White gloves on the servers. Jazz floating through open ballroom windows. Her mother had spent 3 weeks saving money for that luncheon because Naomi had just won a statewide academic scholarship. She still remembered the pale yellow dress her mother bought from a clearance rack downtown. She remembered how proud her mother looked adjusting the collar before they walked inside together. And she remembered the hostess smiling politely before saying, "Member families enter through the front. Catering staff use the side entrance." Naomi blinked once, returning to the present. The same tone. The same polished cruelty hidden beneath customer service language. Daniel Whitmore had no idea he was speaking with generations of humiliation standing quietly in front of him. He thought this moment was about an elevator. Naomi knew it was about something much older. Olivia shifted nervously near the hallway entrance, glancing repeatedly between Naomi and the reservation details glowing on her tablet screen. Her breathing had become shallow. The profile confirmation sat directly in front of her now. Owner access authorization. Executive override clearance. Direct corporate routing. She knew exactly what would happen once this truth surfaced publicly. Daniel noticed her hesitation and immediately hardened his tone. Olivia, stop standing there and return to the front desk. Olivia swallowed. Sir, I really think we should verify, now. The single word cracked through the hallway sharply enough to silence everyone again. Naomi watched Olivia lower her eyes and step backward toward the lobby entrance. Fear moved through organizations faster than policy ever could. The executive near the corridor rubbed one hand against his forehead anxiously. Daniel, listen carefully to me, he said quietly. You are making a serious mistake. Daniel scoffed. The only mistake here is allowing this situation to continue disrupting hotel operations. Then he looked directly at Naomi again. You people always turn simple procedures into accusations. The sentence landed heavily in the corridor. Even Emily looked uncomfortable this time. Marcus closed his eyes briefly like he physically felt the impact of those words. Naomi remained perfectly still. But inside her chest, something old and exhausted tightened painfully for a second. Not because Daniel had surprised her. Men like him never did. What hurt was how familiar this all remained. The assumptions. The lowered expectations. The confidence with which certain people still believed they could decide where black success belonged. She looked toward the freight elevator again. The scratched steel walls reflected fragmented pieces of everyone standing nearby. Daniel standing tall because he believed the building protected him. Emily shrinking slightly because doubt had finally entered the room. Olivia frozen by conscience. Marcus angry but trapped beneath hierarchy. Naomi had seen versions of this dynamic her entire career. Entire systems built around silence. Around letting disrespect happen smoothly enough that nobody felt forced to stop it. A phone camera lifted somewhere behind the hallway entrance. Someone had started recording openly now. Daniel noticed too late. Turn that off, he snapped toward the lobby. Nobody moved. Naomi slowly looked back at him. That is the problem with moments like this, she said softly. They always feel private to the people causing them. Daniel folded his arms defensively. I am protecting standards. Naomi nodded once. No, she replied calmly. You are protecting assumptions. The hallway went quiet again. Then Naomi reached into the pocket of her coat and removed her phone. The moment Naomi Carter unlocked her phone, the atmosphere inside the service corridor changed completely. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the subtle way storms change pressure before people notice rain. Daniel Whitmore saw it immediately. Calm unsettled him more than anger ever could. Angry people could be dismissed. Calm people forced others to question themselves. Naomi scrolled through her phone with effortless precision while the fluorescent lights reflected softly across the black screen. No shaking hands. No panic. No need to defend herself. Emily watched carefully now, her confidence thinning with every passing second. Somewhere behind the hallway entrance, more guests had started gathering near the lobby edge, pretending to wait for elevators while openly listening. A phone camera remained raised. Another joined it quietly. The service corridor was no longer hidden. It had become a stage. Daniel noticed the recording phones and stepped forward irritably. This area is restricted, he snapped toward the gathering crowd. Please return to the main lobby. Nobody moved. In luxury spaces, people often ignored injustice until it became uncomfortable enough to threaten the illusion around them. And right now the illusion was cracking. Naomi finally selected a contact and raised the phone calmly to her ear. The hallway remained silent enough that everyone could hear the call connect. One ring. Then a woman answered immediately. Rachel Brooks. Naomi spoke without raising her voice. Good evening, Rachel. The reaction was instant. The executive near the hallway entrance visibly stiffened. He knew that name too. Rachel Brooks was not an assistant people ignored. She was the executive operations director overseeing every major property within the Carter Hospitality Group. Emily noticed the executive's expression and her face lost even more color. Naomi continued calmly. I need you to initiate executive transition protocol at the Grand Meridian. Silence. Then Rachel's voice sharpened immediately through the speaker. Understood. Is there a security issue? Naomi glanced briefly at Daniel before answering. There appears to be a leadership issue. Daniel scoffed loudly. Who exactly are you pretending to call? Naomi did not answer him. Rachel's keyboard clicks became audible through the phone now. Fast. Precise. Corporate systems opening somewhere far above everyone in this hallway. I am inside the property database now, Rachel said carefully. Would you like full review activation? Naomi's expression never changed. Yes. The executive closed his eyes briefly. He understood exactly what those words meant. Every camera feed, every access log, every management communication, every guest complaint attached to leadership conduct. The hotel itself was about to start telling the truth. Daniel folded his arms defensively again. This is absurd. Naomi lowered the phone slightly. Is it? She asked quietly. Then she returned to the call. Rachel, please suspend all managerial override permissions until further notice. Emily's breath caught audibly. Managerial permissions? She whispered. Rachel answered immediately. Done. Somewhere upstairs, invisible systems began shifting quietly behind glowing computer screens. Keycard privileges changing. Access hierarchies rewriting themselves. Control moving away from the people who thought they owned it. Daniel suddenly reached for his own phone and frowned at the screen. What the hell? He tapped again harder. The elevator authorization application displayed access denied in bright red letters across the screen. Emily immediately checked hers too. Same result. Olivia looked up from her tablet in stunned silence as notifications began appearing rapidly across the hotel management system. Corporate override active. Executive review in progress. Restricted access engaged. Marcus stared openly now. The maintenance worker near the supply closet stopped pretending not to listen. Even the kitchen staff pushing carts through the corridor had slowed down enough to watch. Naomi ended the call calmly and slipped the phone back into her coat pocket. Daniel tried his device again with growing frustration. "This is temporary," he said sharply, though now he sounded less certain. "Somebody is going to explain what is happening immediately." Naomi looked at him steadily beneath the cold fluorescent lights. "They already are," she said softly. Then every employee phone in the corridor vibrated at the exact same moment. The vibration of dozens of phones echoed through the service corridor like the first crack spreading across glass. Employees instinctively reached into pockets and aprons. Notification banners illuminated faces beneath the harsh fluorescent lighting one after another. Corporate compliance alert. Executive review active. Temporary access suspension in effect. The hallway that Daniel Whitmore had controlled only minutes earlier no longer belonged to him. Naomi Carter watched the shift happen, in complete silence. She had seen this moment before in boardrooms across the country. The precise second authority stopped being assumed and started being questioned. Emily stared at her screen in disbelief. "This cannot be happening," she whispered. Her employee credentials had already downgraded from managerial authorization to temporary review status. Basic access only. Daniel grabbed her phone from her hands abruptly and checked the message himself. The confidence in his face began cracking for the first time all evening. "This is some kind of error," he snapped. "Call information systems immediately." "I already tried," Emily said quietly. "Nobody is answering." The executive near the hallway entrance looked exhausted now, like a man watching a train derail in slow motion while knowing exactly how preventable it had been. He loosened his tie again and finally stepped fully into the corridor. "Daniel," he said carefully, "you need to stop talking." Daniel turned toward him sharply. "Why is everyone acting insane right now?" Then he pointed directly at Naomi. "This woman walks in here dressed like staff, refuses standard procedure, and suddenly corporate systems start locking management out?" Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Interesting," she said softly. "You still think the problem began when I walked in?" The freight elevator doors finally slid shut behind her with a heavy metallic thud before slowly descending downward into the building. The sound echoed through the corridor like punctuation. Service elevator. Downward. Hidden. The symbolism was impossible to ignore now. Olivia took a cautious step forward, holding the tablet tightly against her chest. Her voice trembled slightly. "Sir, her profile has unrestricted owner clearance." Silence hit the hallway instantly. Even the distant kitchen noise seemed to disappear for a second. Daniel stared at Olivia as though he had misheard her completely. "What?" Olivia swallowed hard. "There are only 3 people in the entire company database with this level of authorization." Emily's face lost the last bit of color she had left. Marcus slowly removed his hotel cap and held it against his chest without realizing he had done it. The executive closed his eyes briefly again, almost relieved the truth had finally entered the room out loud. But Daniel refused to accept it. "No," he said immediately. "No chance. Somebody hacked the system." Naomi looked at him steadily. "You built your entire judgment on appearance," she said quietly. "Now reality feels impossible to you." Another wave of notifications buzzed across employee phones simultaneously. This time the message carried executive priority status. Mandatory leadership review in progress. All security footage preserved effective immediately. Do not alter or delete operational records. Emily covered her mouth slightly. She understood exactly what that meant. Every word spoken tonight now existed permanently inside corporate archives. Every hallway camera, every lobby recording, every guest phone video already spreading online. Daniel suddenly looked around the corridor for support and found none. Not from Emily. Not from the executive. Not even from the employees standing nearby pretending to organize carts while openly listening now. Power had abandoned him faster than he thought possible. Naomi finally stepped closer, her voice still controlled enough that everyone had to remain silent to hear it clearly. "Do you know the difference between luxury and dignity, Daniel?" He said nothing. "Luxury is what this hotel sells," Naomi continued softly. "Dignity is what you try to take away." Somewhere back in the lobby, applause suddenly erupted from a small group of guests who had clearly heard enough to understand what was happening. Daniel's expression tightened in panic. He looked toward the hallway entrance just as two uniformed security officers appeared at the far end of the corridor. For one brief second, relief crossed his face. Then both officers walked directly past him and stopped in front of Naomi Carter instead. The two security officers stopped directly in front of Naomi Carter and straightened immediately. "Ma'am," the older officer said respectfully, "Corporate instructed us to ensure your safety and assist with anything you need." Daniel Whitmore stared at them in disbelief. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "I called security because she was disrupting operations." Neither officer looked at him. That hurt more than any argument could have. Authority was disappearing from Daniel piece by piece right in front of everyone watching. Naomi gave the officers a polite nod. "Thank you. I am fine." The younger officer glanced briefly toward Daniel before speaking carefully. "Corporate also requested that all current management remain on site pending review." Emily looked like she might faint. "Pending review?" she whispered. The phrase echoed through the corridor like a closing door. Nobody used those words unless termination was already somewhere nearby. Back in the lobby, the crowd had grown larger now. Guests openly stood near the hallway entrance pretending not to watch while recording everything on their phones. Videos were already spreading online faster than anyone inside the hotel realized. The little girl from earlier still stood beside her mother, staring quietly toward Naomi with wide eyes that carried confusion and admiration at the same time. Marcus finally stepped fully into the corridor instead of hiding near the luggage carts. He looked directly at Naomi with visible regret. "I should have spoken sooner," he admitted quietly. Naomi turned toward him calmly. "You noticed," she replied softly. "That matters." Marcus lowered his eyes for a second. Nobody had ever answered his guilt with grace before. Daniel ran one frustrated hand through his hair and pointed toward Naomi again. "This entire situation is insane. She walked in here looking like she did not belong." Naomi held his gaze steadily. "And what exactly does belonging look like to you?" Daniel opened his mouth, but no answer came out. Because for the first time all evening, he understood the trap beneath his own assumptions. Every explanation sounded worse when spoken out loud. Emily stepped backward slowly until her shoulders touched the cold concrete wall behind her. Her phone buzzed again. She looked down and inhaled sharply. "Daniel." He snatched the phone from her hands again. This time the message came directly from Corporate Executive Operations. "Immediate suspension of regional management authority pending investigation. Full compliance required." Daniel's face drained completely of color. "No," he muttered. "No, this is ridiculous." The executive standing near the entrance finally spoke with complete honesty for the first time all night. "You should have stopped when Marcus warned you." Daniel turned toward him angrily. "You knew?" The executive nodded once. "I recognized her in the lobby." "Then why did you not say something?" The executive looked exhausted. "Because people like you never listen until consequences arrive." Silence spread again. Heavy. Honest. Naomi looked around the corridor slowly. Service workers standing near supply closets. Housekeepers frozen beside laundry carts. Kitchen employees pretending to organize trays while openly watching. People who spend entire careers moving quietly through luxury spaces without ever truly being seen. And tonight they had all watched a black woman with power get treated exactly the same way they often were. That realization hurt Naomi more than her own humiliation, because it meant the culture inside the building had been broken long before tonight. Olivia stepped closer, holding the tablet carefully. "Ma'am," she said softly to Naomi, "the executive elevator has been reopened for you." Naomi glanced toward the service elevator one last time. The steel doors remained closed now, scratched and dull beneath the flickering fluorescent light. Then she looked back toward the glowing lobby entrance where gold lighting reflected across marble floors beyond the corridor. Two elevators. Two worlds. One built to elevate people publicly. The other designed to keep certain people hidden behind walls. Daniel noticed where her eyes landed and finally understood the symbolism too late. Naomi picked up her suitcase calmly and started walking toward the lobby. The security officers stepped aside respectfully. Nobody tried to stop her anymore. As she passed Daniel, she paused just long enough for her quiet voice to reach only him. "You forced the owner of this hotel toward the freight elevator," she said softly. "And the saddest part is that you still thought you were protecting standards."